Cybersecurity is for the benefit of someone, not necessarily you. Corporate cybersecurity is for the benefit of the corporation.
I think it's privacy from other people, but not from Apple, right?
Specifically, Google can track every click.
The UK government needs access to all VPN or all encrypted data. If you open up a back door like that, hackers are going to find that anyway.
They're making a decision about your personality based on what you search for. If you search for a topic that may imply aggressiveness, then they imply you're aggressive, that you should be watched, and they put you on a watch list. And then they give your name to the FBI or whatever. You know, Terminator, Skynet-like. It's the fact that they can give the AI on your phone specific instructions. If 10% of people kept their data away from Google, that's enough for the world to be safe.
You can dive into the world of programming with a twist of creativity with Brilliant's Creative Coding course. Spanning 8 lessons, this course builds your computational program-solving skills by writing programs that produce complex outputs. You'll start by learning how to use variables to store and update values, as well as how to harness the power of a for loop. Here you'll learn how to automate tasks, create patterns, and add dynamic colors to your projects. These are the foundational building blocks that you'll need to learn if you want to learn how to code using languages such as Python. Brilliant's courses are not just boring videos or boring lessons. They're very interactive, very hands-on, that promises growth, engagement, and a splash of fun. Designed for aspiring professionals and hobbyists, Brilliant's Creative Coding course is your gateway to exploring coding in a whole new light. Are you ready to embark on your coding journey? Enroll now at brilliant.org/David Bombal. And the good news is a special 20% discount. Don't just code, create. Everyone, it's David Bombal back with a very special guest. Rob, great to have you back again.
Great to be here.
Rob, we last spoke, and I've written it down. Check the video. August 2022 is when we published our previous video.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
Time flies. And what's amazing, right? You said that a phone will be able to sense its environment.
Meaning the camera, the sensors of the phone can actually observe and look at situations. As an example, why couldn't a phone react and determine that there's a situation of violence?
And at that time, it sounded like, okay, that doesn't make sense. But it wasn't 2 weeks later, and Apple released their new phone with crash detection. So I've seen this about you, right? You've said things like you predict stuff or you see stuff that's coming.
That's
and
right.
you're just like thinking about things. And then unfortunately, in many cases, it actually becomes true. So firstly, it'd be good for you just to recap who you are for people who perhaps don't know you. And then I want to get your predictions for what we have to be careful about, because our privacy is being invaded in a major way. So for everyone who's watching, before we get into the interview, please go and look at Rob's channel. I've put his link below. Fantastic information there. I've learned a lot from Rob. Lots of information to help you think about your privacy. And one of the big differentiations that Rob makes, and Rob, we can talk about this as we go through the interview, is the difference between cybersecurity and privacy. Those are two separate conversations. A large part of my audience are interested in cyber and cybersecurity, but don't forget about privacy. So please go and show the love and sub, link below.
I just heard a recent announcement from Google about Find My Android, and for many of you, this would have gone into one ear and out the other. Hey, no big deal. It's an old feature that Google's copying from Apple. Actually, it is a big deal, because up until this point, the infrastructure of what I call Skynet reached only 50% of the population. Now it is 100%. What do I mean by Skynet? It's a quietly implemented independent and wireless communications infrastructure called a mesh network, which, believe it or not, can power the autonomous devices you saw in the movie Terminator. This mesh network can be used to give commands to specific devices, as well as receive information from specific devices without a central network like the internet. A mesh network is more powerful than you think. The popular uses of this technology have so far been simplistic. But the scary part is what this technology can do, and most of you are so unaware. This will also translate to a complete loss of privacy to most people. There's still a way for maybe 1% of us to stay away from Skynet, and I will tell you about that later in this video. But generally speaking, this trend will continue. It won't be long before every electronic device is tapped into this network. And the images of AI controlling machines are not a distant possibility at all. If you're interested in learning about Skynet in real life, stay right there.
So can you introduce yourself and then just like who you are very quickly again, and then tell us your predictions for this year?
Well, I'm Rob Braxman, and of course I have a YouTube channel, Rob Braxman Tech. The main prediction I have coming up is the evolution of client-side scanning, which
interesting.
You talked about an iPhone, and you were talking about crash detection, which I believe is also in the Google Pixel. And that actually is a small part of it. The bigger part of it is called client-side scanning. There are laws in the EU, for example, that they tried to pass. There's a law that got passed in the UK that dealt with the desire for the government to introduce client-side scanning. And it not said in those words, of course. They can, they can tone it down so you can tolerate it. But the thing is, that's what it is. The intelligence community found that the way to beat encryption, because many things are now encrypted and they can't see the data, and the way to beat encryption is by scanning your phone pre-encryption. And so that's the biggest thing. Now, on an Apple device, they actually perfected this, and they do AI client-side scanning. The AI can be given instructions, say, search for A, B, C, D, E, and they were using it. The justification was it's for, what's the proper term for that? Child
images that people shouldn't have,
right, child-related stuff. So they wanted to say, hey, we're gonna stop the illegal photos from being on your phone by having the AI search for it. Now, what they don't tell you is the mechanism doesn't really care what it is looking for. It can look for anything. It doesn't have to be a particular topic that they announced. And so they actually announced that they have shut down or are not implementing the client-side scanning for the child-related photos. So yes, so they're not doing that. They announced they're not doing that, but that was an excuse anyway. The problem is that technology for it still exists in an iPhone. It's in an API. Many people have discovered this, including a video from Louis Rossmann, where he actually showed the person who detected that the phone was talking to an API that was scanning the photos in your photo library. This is something that is reaching another level of surveillance. And in the US, 56% of people here have iPhones. So they think that's pretty safe. And Apple, tells them, oh, this is perfect. This is great. And, you have the most secure phone ever. Security is not privacy. You got to understand that.
Yep.
So yes, it may be the most secure phone, as far as some hacker trying to break in, which is not true. Many people have hacked it. But if they want to challenge the claim of being a secure phone, the problem is not a private phone. If the government can do something, it's not even just the government, anyone. Apple certainly can do it. They can use the AI, as I said, how many years ago now? A year and a half ago, that that the phone will be able to, through the camera, use the AI to detect what's going on around it. And that's what client-side scanning is. Client-side scanning is to use the AI to scan the phone. Now, they're scanning the file content, but there's no actual technical limitation to scanning through the camera. So let's say you're looking for a certain image and you want to see, well, who's at a demonstration, and they can just turn on the camera, and if you're holding the camera, you can see the surroundings, and the AI can say, we know where you are because we have the AI that can sense where the location is just from the image, which is not a new technology. They've been doing this for a while. So that's my main fear. And of course, the other prediction I have, and I already mentioned it here, is how the AI is involved. As I told you, the client-side scanning involved the AI, and the AI will be involved more. Now, here's the the main thing that I think is going to be the evolution of AI. So far, you're using, let's say, GPT-4 or ChatGPT, and you're doing some search of something, and that search does not include your personal data. That's not a limitation. What is the Genesis program from Google doing in the background? They have the data for every individual and every click you have on the internet. So what if they are already feeding that data to the AI? So the AI will really know you. Now, I made a video about this, talking about this specifically, about how to push this AI technology. The very first step that, in my prediction here, the very first step that will happen is that the AI will be your friend. It'll be your friend. You will talk to it, and it will gauge your political nature, your religious, your values, your preferences, and the AI will know you. And people will think, "Oh my, this is so nice. I have a personal assistant that can do crash detection and all of that." But they forget one thing, my friend. They forget one thing. It is one computer. One. It is not your personal AI. It's the AI of whoever, Google, OpenAI, X, one computer.
Yeah, the AI thing is really worrying, right? Because for AI to effectively work, it has to have massive amounts of data. And they want more and more data to make AI even more effective.
And of course, who has the most data? This is the problem that most people don't know. It's Google. Did you see the news about how the Congress voted to ban TikTok?
Yeah, I just saw something about that, but I don't know the details. I just saw a headline.
It's kind of funny because they said, "Oh, we'll ban TikTok because it's collecting data." I mean, I installed TikTok just to see, and I found that what it can collect is fairly limited. It's not much, and what Facebook and Google can pick from you is 100 times more complicated. My goodness. I mean, Google, specifically Google, can track every click. And people always say, "Oh, that is hyperbole. There's no such thing." And no, if you actually understand the mechanism, you'll be shocked. Of course, people don't pay attention to me when I say that, but that's the truth. The Google ID pervades the internet. The Google ID exists in just about everything you do. It's incredible.
I must say this for everyone, like the naysayers. It was interesting because when I interviewed you for the first time, you said some stuff, and I was like, Rob can't be right about that. And then I went and did research, and I couldn't find anything that you said that was incorrect, which was, I think that's what everyone needs to do is watching. If they don't agree with what you're saying, they need to go and do their own research. Go and look at Louis Rosman. Go and look at other people's YouTube channels. Just go and look on Google. It was and then the prediction was like, Rob, how on earth is a phone going to ever sense this happening? And then crash detection happened literally 2 weeks later. So yeah, go for it. Give us your opinion, because I want to hear what you see coming down the road, because you and I have discussed about Skynet taking over, and it seems like 1984 is, I think I've heard you say, is already past. It's more scary than that. And, the Skynet predictions are already here.
That's correct. It is, unfortunately. And I'm trying to get people to understand. And you know what? I kind of gave up. I said, only a certain population will listen to me. And my channel does better when I just focus on the people who already are interested versus the average person who doesn't want to listen. I'm not trying to convince the average person doesn't want to listen. Your audience is probably that group that is probably not exposed to this. Versus my audience is very specific.
I think a lot of people are interested. A lot of people are interested. I think especially these days, as more and more revelations come to light. But sorry, go on.
Yeah. So my style, and it's different from a lot of tech-related, even privacy channles on YouTube, is that I give a lot of detail. My videos are really deep. I mean, if you're gonna ask me about the phone network, I'm gonna give it to you in a lot of detail. And that of course scares a newbie because they hear a lot of terms, and it's natural. But the thing is that you don't really have to pay attention to the details so much. It's more about understanding what the point is. It's so if you don't know what a specific terminology is, it doesn't matter. I'm just showing you that people can research what I say, find out the information by themselves, and they will learn that I am not inventing this stuff. Or if I am inventing it, which sometimes I have to theorize, that the probability is that I will be right. Because you know why? You know why that is? Why that prediction stuff works for me? Because I've been in tech so long. I mean, I've been doing this for so long, and I've worked on every kind of system imaginable, from something as obscure as graphics to medical systems and everything in between. I've done everything, including statistical modeling. I mean, the kind of programming that I've done at the enterprise level, on even on mainframes, is very broad. And because of this, I understand technology very well. I understand how they can use it badly. And one discovery I had over the years, which is still true to this day, that if the technology allows it to be used badly, they will.
Yeah.
They will. So client-side scanning. So Apple introduced the technology to use the AI to scan the device, and in the future, likely to scan the environment using the camera. That's I have no evidence that that's there yet. But what's the difference? Scanning a file is no different than scanning an image to the camera. It's the same concept. So whatever the imagined capability is for surveillance, it's already there. I mean, that's already built into the API. And the problem is, will they misuse it? Well, historically, that's pretty much guaranteed. Now, something that happened late last year, that's very interesting, and I made several videos about it, which the videos were popular videos, and that's about the EU and the UK and the US all trying to implement the same client-side scanning laws. Now, why is that? It's almost like they talked about it and said, let's do this. They agreed. Yeah, this client-side scanning is going to save surveillance in the Western world. So let's do this. So, in fact, they are doing it. So the first thing they want to do is implement it in law. And the only place where it succeeded is in the UK. It has not succeeded yet in the EU or in the US. It's still in the works, though. So you never know what might happen.
It's interesting in the UK because they've now got laws that they haven't implemented practically yet, but it's law now that the UK government needs access to all VPN or all encrypted data. And Facebook and other companies, I'll just use them like as a big example, like with WhatsApp, has threatened to remove WhatsApp from the UK if they actually try and force that through. But it's like now the UK government want to be able to read everything. It's like if you open up a back door like that, hackers are going to find that anyway. So it's like crazy to expect companies to allow the UK government to read everything.
Right. Now, the trick, though, that at least on the Apple side, the way the technology works to ensure that hackers, in theory, don't have unfettered access, is that in the case of Apple, the AI is doing the search, not some external party.
Yeah, locally.
Right. Yeah. So what they did instead, and this is the part that's really, Terminator Skynet-like, is the fact that they can give the AI on your phone specific instructions, say, search for this in your environment or in your file system. That is pretty vague. It could be anything.
Yep.
If the AI can recognize it, it's possible. Like, say, search all phones with nude pictures. That's pretty easy. AI is not even going to blink. It's going to figure that out in seconds. Okay, and say, search for somebody nude in the UK, specifically in London, at this time of day. AI can go find that out pretty easy.
I mean, the AI piece is really worrying, right? Because AI seems to be totally anti-privacy.
Well, again, not totally understood yet. I made a video about Neuralink recently.
Yeah, that's one of my questions. What about Neuralink? What do you think about that? So you can answer both in one go, maybe.
People are focused on Neuralink and say, oh, you're giving Elon Musk access to your brain and they can manipulate you and convert you and do things to you because they can just feed data directly to your brain because it's a two-way interface, not a one-way interface. That aside, obviously anyone with access can do anything they want, right? But that aside, the question is, why did he want to do this? What was the stated purpose at the very beginning? And the stated purpose is actually that he foresees an AI to AI war. So this is not Skynet per se. It's Skynet oligopoly, like many Skynets.
Yeah.
So he foresees that many Skynets will be fighting each other, not one. And it could be governments too with their own Skynet. And they could all be fighting each other. And the purpose of Neuralink was to enable a human to have the data and intelligence from the AI that they bind to, and to protect them from the other AI. That's the real, his real intended purpose. Of course, for now, it's going to be used for paraplegics and quadriplegics and so on. But that is the stated. He stated this, so it's not. I don't have to make it up. This is not a prediction I have to make because somebody else made a prediction.
So, Rob, you've said client-side scanning is the biggest prediction that you've got at the moment. AI is, you've been talking about AI for a while. I mean, that seems to be a massive thing that's going to change a lot of our lives. AI is not good for privacy. Client-side scanning is not good for privacy. Neuralink is just like, wow, would I ever allow a machine to connect to my brain? Any other things? Because I want to get to the how do we counter this part of the conversation. But is there any other predictions or things you want to highlight?
No, that's the other side I want to highlight later on, which can be part of our normal discussion, is where the AI data is coming from, and that's the Google data and all that. The people don't understand. They want to participate in that, but they don't even realize the danger in participating in that data collection. So one of the main questions is what feeds the AI. So the AI is not just a machine that's going to self-invent data. It can invent data. But the fear that I have is when the AI starts to know you personally and becomes your personal assistant. So in order for the AI to be your personal assistant, the AI has to know everything about your life. You got to be talking to it constantly. The AI has to collect the data about you and learn and say, oh, yeah, this is your politics, this is your preferences, and so on. I made a separate video about that before the Neuralink video. So it's it's a very scary environment, because now you have a situation where, and you haven't experienced this yet, where the AI has your data. Now, the big question that people have is, how does the AI have my data? I mean, I'm using my phone, but I'm being very careful of what I do on the phone. And so how does it have the data? Well, the biggest threat actually is Google. Facebook is the second biggest threat. It's not really TikTok, in spite of the fact that TikTok, is perceived to be dangerous. It's not in the same realm as Google and Facebook. So, and this is the part that I've talked about. This is why in our last interview, I talked about the browser isolation, all techniques, the Google phones, and so on. Why do we even have to do that? Well, the thing is that once the AI, or at least the data collection side, which is for the AI, identifies you and your moves on the internet, they now tag every action. So this is how it works mechanically, just in a big picture sense. You log into Google. Google then stores your Google ID, which is your Gmail address, down into a cookie on the computer or the phone. Now, then you go to Site A. Site A is running Google Analytics, Google Translate, Google, okay, on there. So what you don't know is that any site that's connected to Google can retrieve your Google ID, because a Google domain can retrieve any ID from its own domain. It owns a domain. Therefore, even if it's left by another app, so you're on your Google site, YouTube, let's say, you're on YouTube, and you save your Google ID, it doesn't matter that you're no longer on YouTube. You go to Site A can see that Google ID, and guess what? Google Analytics, which is embedded into most sites, then tracks your clicks in that site, stored with your Google ID. So now you are you're done. I mean, every click track. So when most people don't understand the depth of this. That means every single activity you have on the internet, if you don't follow what I'm talking about, will identify you and put you in this AI database. How do you stop that from happening? Easy. you basically ban Google from ever seeing that Google ID. And I talked about the techniques for doing this. And one of them is to have a device that has no Google ID. Which device doesn't have a Google ID? Only one, a de-Googled phone. So if you have a de-Googled phone of whatever brand, as long as it's de-Googled, meaning it's running Android open source project, it cannot send that data to Google because you never logged into the device. My de-Googled phone never saw a Google ID in its lifetime. Now, if you're on a browser on a computer, you log into YouTube, you also have a Google ID in there. By the way, you can't run YouTube on a de-Googled phone for the reason that you can't log into Google. So you're on a computer and you log into YouTube and you have your Google ID. Well, I mean, you know, you and I are YouTube creators, so we like people to watch YouTube. However, this is what I talked about in the other video, is to separate out your environment so the Google ID doesn't leave what is the area that is known. So Google knows what you're doing on Google, so you don't have to hide what you're doing with Google, although you can manipulate that. What you can do, though, is go to site A and not have any Google ID association with it. And boy, when that happens, the AI can't attribute it to you. Site A now becomes a blind site. It doesn't know who was there. It doesn't connect it to you. How do you do that? By using a separate browser. And you can do this on the phone as well as the computer. So a separate browser does not allow the Google ID to be seen because the cookie does not cross browsers. So it's a very simple technique. You can even watch YouTube on the second browser. Usually I set up a third browser for this because as long as you don't log into Google, it's fine. You can use Google things that are not logged in. Just don't connect it to your Gmail or to your Google ID. So the permissions for cookies, and this is something I realized when Google did the universal login for all of the Google properties back in the day. I already knew this was going to happen because, just like you said, I predict things. So when they had the universal Google ID, I was already worried about that. When was that? 2007, right before YouTube.
I remember, it's a long time,
Before YouTube. YouTube was the one that got them to do the universal ID. So if you do anything with Google, they had one ID. And YouTube is unique because the one ID connects to your email, so they can read your email as well. So the cookie problem is that the cookie, in fact, every login you make is saved in a separate cookie. And how do you prove this? This is not a big mystery. If you sign in with multiple accounts on Google browser or Chrome, you actually will see that it will list all of your alternate logins. How did it know that? Because it stored it, of course. So it's now in there. And if it's in there, they can assign a cookie to it. If they assign a cookie to it, then any site with Google Analytics can now read that data about your multiple logins, your email, whatever they store in the cookie. And then where does that go? Not the site. The site doesn't see that. What sees that is Google. Now, if you ever dug deep into Google Analytics, and I have back in the day, like 10 years ago, and I was surprised that Google could tell the personal preferences of every person that clicked on my site. So they say, oh, this person's interested in photography, interested in cars. And so I said, how do they know that? How do they know that? And that's when I said, okay, there you go. We found the answer. The Google ID is collected, and therefore they know everything that you do based on the Google ID. And that's pretty dangerous material there, the Google ID. And then, of course, there's the Facebook ID or the Meta ID, which is similar. So Facebook has the Facebook like button, which are engaged into many sites. And so that also can detect anything that Facebook leaves as a cookie to identify you inside some other website that may be connected to Facebook in some way by having the Facebook code. So what it is, again, for the most technical of you, it's JavaScript code. It's an iframe. So what happens is the Google code that you insert into your website is actually an iframe. So it's a fully running website inside your website, a website within a website. which has complete access.
Okay, so Rob, so just make sure I understand. On a computer, you talk about browser isolation. You have, for instance, 3 browsers. And if you could just make sure that I've got it right. The first one you would use, for instance, to go to Google properties like YouTube or whatever, and you're logged in.
Right.
Then you'd have a second one, and that's what you would use to go to non-Google sites.
Right.
And you're not logged in. And then the third one is perhaps where you do like a private browser window, for lack of a better term. So then you could go to YouTube or whatever, but you're not logged
in.
So that gives you browser isolation, so they can't track you across those 3, right?
That's correct. So that's the best technique. But you have to do the phone as well. And the reason you have to do the phone as well is because of something called cross-device tracking. They've gotten sophisticated here. So
what is that?
Cross-device tracking is connecting your mobile phone to whatever you're doing on the internet at the same time. And how do they do that? Because they actually can discover if your phone is online, what the location is on the phone. They always know the location. They say, oh, no, I turned off location. I went to settings. Turn off. Yeah, you're in dreamland. Dreamland. Location permissions apply only to third parties, not to Apple and Google. In case you didn't know this, they capture all that and they put it. Google calls it the location database the Google Sensor Vault. They know every phone and every location 24/7. The Google Sensor Vault was used as evidence in the January 6th riots at the Capitol. So if you're doubting that I'm making this up, no, I've known this forever. And I said, yeah, they're going to use that. And it's more accurate than tower triangulation. So they use that.
So I've interviewed you and other people that have said the problem with Apple, for instance, let's pick on Apple a bit, is they say that they want to have a very secure phone, very private phone, but it's private as in they're not allowing third parties to access the data. But like you just said now, they have access to your location, right?
Correct. And again, mostly they talk about, well, they say the ad says iPhone is privacy. So I guess they use the word privacy, but they're more interested in security than privacy.
I think it's privacy from other people, but not from Apple, right?
Yeah. So, and it's worse. And since our last talk, iPhones now have the integrated AirTag behavior. When you turn off the iPhone, it turns into an AirTag. So they're even doing data collection even when the phone is off. This is pretty crazy. And this is the other thing that people don't realize. And I've tried to prove this over and over. Just to prove this, I went to the physical Apple store, got myself a big iPad, the big one, and then I returned it. And when they returned it, they said, I do the factory reset. And when I returned it, they said, could you log into your iCloud account and disable the location tracking, find my phone? I said, we just reset the device. Factory reset. Why do you need me to go there? And the reason is, and I knew this, and I was so quiet, but I was, reveling in my discovery that, they're bullshitting us all this time, was because an iPhone or any Apple product is emitting location data and tracking data constantly using the feature called NLP, Near Location Provider. So Apple's an NLP, and the NLP actually collects all the information on locations on the devices. However, you personally don't see this unless you tell Find My Phone who the ID of the phone is connected to. So people say, well, I turned off location tracking in my iCloud, so it's not going to do that. I don't have Find My active. You're in dreamland. If you steal an iPhone from the Apple store, don't expect that you will be able to keep that phone forever. They will know who you are if they care. They may not care, like a lot of robberies like that here in LA that actually occurred where they went to the Apple store and stole phones. And later on, they find out that they can't use it because, of course, it identified those phones. They know what they are from the ID that's attached to the hardware identifier, and they can block those phones, so they can't be used. And they don't know that the reason this is happening is that the phone is sending data to Apple, just like an AirTag, irrespective of who owns it. So when you go to the store, some store, and buy an AirTag, the AirTag is running already as long as the battery is in, even when you don't associate an identity to it. Same with an iPhone. The iPhone is even at the store, if it's plugged in and running, it's already sending out that data, the metadata of locations and so on. So all you're doing is saying, I want to associate the device to me. Now, people have called me a conspiracy theorist for saying this. It's really frustrating, and this is I have especially Apple fanboys. They refuse to listen to me here, and I told you 56% of the people in the U.S. have an iPhone, and they refuse to listen to me that this is the capability of that phone. But that's the reality. A iPhone, and I'm sure a Google Pixel as well, or any Google Android, is doing the same thing, sending data to the NLP. The NLP for Android is Google. The NLP for Apple is Apple, near location provider, NLP. So the NLP does Wi-Fi triangulation. That's one of the things it does. And the other things it does is collects the Wi-Fi around you, matches it to the GPS, tracks the routers around you, sends that data to Apple or Google, and then use that data to track other people. So this is like a community served location system. Like the same people who are being tracked are providing the data to allow the tracking.
It's crazy. I mean, I think there's been a change in attitude for a lot of people. A lot of the people watching my videos are very interested in privacy. So, Rob, it gets to that old question, right? What do we do about it? So let's talk about phones, because phones seem to be the worst. In our last interview, you said that you'd rather use a computer than a phone for anything, well, as much as you can, because of all the tracking and the problems. So you mentioned de-Googled phone. So can you just give us some options? I know you sell. I don't know if do you still sell your branded de-Googled phone?
I'm out of stock of my branded phone called Brax 2, but in the summer we'll likely have Brax 3 then. So right now I'm out of stock with that. So right now I'm just selling Pixels. So we convert anti-Google Google Pixels, and then that's the same thing. I have a Pixel right this moment. The Google phone, the main feature of it that's most important, because there are many de-Googled OSs. And for what I'm talking about, which is to deny them the Google ID, they're pretty much all the same. If they don't have Google services in it, you're done. It doesn't, to me, as far as privacy is concerned, that's all you need. Now, some are promoting their particular OS for some other features, which may or may not be necessary. If you have any kind of the Google phone running any kind of OS, then you can pretty much say that you're safe from your Google ID being captured. Now, that's just one part. That's a Google ID. That's the main function of a Google phone, is to be an identity-less phone. The phone does not have an identity. So everything you do on that phone is not going to be tracked based on the ID. However, it can be tracked from location if you turn that on, which obviously, if you're smart, you're not going to. And there is no background process like with the iPhone or Google to take your location 24/7. So that does not exist on a Google phone. So if you went to the January 6th Capitol event there and you had a Google phone, well, you're not going to be charged because they won't be able to prove that you were there, because you won't have a location in the Google database. That alone is like amazing. So that's what you do on the phone side. On the computer side, the Apple devices track you just like they do with the phone. So you have your Apple ID in there. So that's pretty worrisome. You can use Windows, but you got to turn a lot of stuff up. It's not 100%, but it's, fortunately with Windows, you can turn a lot of things off. And obviously, if you have Linux, you'll be a lot better off because it doesn't report to a central point. So that's why my preference for a computer.
Yeah, so I would say the best option is Linux, right?
Yes.
Any specific distros that you like?
No, no. I personally use Pop OS.
Yeah.
Which is a fork of Ubuntu. And I've tried them all. I did a video comparing different ones, and some are more user-friendly than others. I think that the new users prefer Ubuntu, Mint, various flavors of Mint and so on. And they definitely do well with Pop OS. Pop OS is the makers of System 76 computers. And the OS is basically the same as Ubuntu, but without the check. There's a login check every time you log into Ubuntu. It goes to check.ubuntu.com, I believe. It's like a network check. So if you enable that and that's happening, then in theory, Ubuntu could be taking your IP address and recording that. In theory, and I don't believe they care. That's not really their purpose for existence. So I don't believe it's important enough. Pop! OS doesn't have that. So for that reason, I stick to Pop! OS because I have the advantages of Ubuntu without the disadvantages of that network check.
Okay, so operating system on a computer would be Linux. Pop! OS is a good choice. I mean, there are others out there, but I've heard Pop! OS recommended often. I just want to go back to the phone. You Lineage OS or Graphene or something else, right? But I think when we discussed this last time, you used Lineage OS because it's less of a heavy lift than some of the others out there.
No, actually, I mostly use Calyx now.
Oh, Calyx. Okay, so explain why you prefer that.
It's the most user-friendly, I found.
Okay.
The problem with Lineage OS is it can't update to a major version number. So if you're on Android 10, you can't update to Android 11. Whereas in Calyx, you can do that. But Calyx is limited to Pixel phones. So it doesn't work for everyone. So if you have a Motorola, then you have to use Lineage. If you have a Pixel, you can use Graphene or Calyx and others. The two most popular probably Graphene and Calyx for a Pixel. Brax 2 phones obviously use Brax OS. So, and the Brax 3 phone will use Brax OS. They're semi-equivalent. So it depends on some, UI changes and so on. I found that the average user works very well with Calyx because it doesn't have a lot of restrictions for normal use. And that's really what I want. I want people to use it like a normal phone, get comfortable with it, but without having to think that, they have to be like a spy and they have, super secret kind of activities, because that's not what this is all about.
Yeah.
Once you hide your Google ID, you've accomplished whatever you need to accomplish. Most apps that are unpaid will work with Calyx OS or Brax OS.
I was going to say, that's the elephant in the room, right? How do I get apps? And I think you've mentioned before the Aurora store or other options, right?
Right. So the Aurora store has been failing in recent months. I think Google's onto them. And so Aurora store does it by faking multiple Google IDs. And then they're retrieving it based on those multiple Google IDs and then sending it to your phone through Aurora. And Google has detected that and keeps banning them. So they have a limit. So a lot of people cannot use the Aurora store, but I just told people to use apkpure.com. apkpure.com is pretty spammy, but it's actually supported by Google. So there's no problem. And then the thing about apkpure.com is it has older copies, not just the latest, but some older version, which is kind of useful.
How's that different to F-Droid?
F-Droid is a different animal because it's not connected to the Google Play Store. apkpure.com and Aurora Store takes the applications from the Google Play Store and just distributes it to you indirectly. Now, in contrast, F-Droid has its own app store. And one of the rules, and this is one of the rules that people don't understand about F-Droid and why it's really special, is that F-Droid requires that you give them the source code. So for F-Droid to work, they have to be able to compile the code themselves, meaning they can examine the code. And if you're acting like you have some suspicious app, they can check and see if the app is doing anything suspicious. And then they can then compile it and put it on the F-Droid store. The advantage of F-Droid is that you know that there's no hanky-panky going on in the app because somebody else, a third party, actually examined it. I don't know how much time they spend examining it, but they do probably a cursory check. But if there's evidence of something fishy, they can always go back and look at the source code. Now, this is one of the reasons my own app, BraxMe, cannot be put into F-Droid, is because I have to rewrite it in such a way that they can see the source code. It has to be written completely in Java, which mine is not. So because mine is a web app, very little of it is actually, app related. So it's actually a web app. So I can't really get the benefit on the F-Droid store because they don't have any source code to really compile. For that reason, I don't have Braxme, my own app, on F-Droid.
How do you get notifications? Because that's a big one people worry about, right? Will I still be able to get notifications if I use Calyx OS or one of these others?
Yeah, so notifications is handled by a module called Micro G or Micro Google, the fake Google. So all the Google phones, well, I know that Calyx and BraxOS and Lineage OS have this. No, they don't have this. I manually put it on. Lineage does not have it. I manually load it. Calyx has it automatically. I don't believe any other one has it by default. But you load in Micro G, and Micro G then will reroute the notifications traffic without a Google identity and take the traffic. So the traffic goes to their servers and then it's fed back to the phone as a notification. And Micro G handles that. So you actually get notifications if you have the Google phone with certain OSs, like anyone using Micro G. If you don't have Micro G on your phone, you can put it on.
Okay, so if I get a Calyx phone or Brax phone, I can get notifications. I can get apps. Like, is there certain apps that I can't get, or is it only a specific few that I'll be able to get?
Yeah. So what apps can you not get? Any app that has to be paid for will not function because there's no way to pay. You don't have a Google ID, so there's no payment method. So some apps can function partially without any kind of in-app payment. If so, it might still work. However, some of them immediately when the app boot says we need Google services. An example of that is Facebook.
Yeah.
The reality is though that many of these apps do work, and you can just ignore the error message that says no Google services because they want that for payments primarily. If you can ignore that part, and normally it will run. So I would say 90% of normal apps that are not from Google will work. Some apps from Google would actually work. The ones that I know work without a Google ID are Waze, and I believe Google Maps can be made to work as well.
Have I heard correctly? I'm trying to remember now that you have two phones. Is that correct?
Well, I've changed that now because I became a phone service now. So I have a new service called Brax Virtual Phone. So you can now subscribe on my site and have a separate phone number that you can use for 2FA. And so you can have one phone and have it forward to your phone. Like if you want to forward your 2FA notifications to your normal phone, you can just do it with one phone. Here in the US, we only have single SIM phones. In other places, you can have dual SIM, so you can put two of those, two SIM cards. Now, before I did the service, the Brax Virtual Phone, I had two devices. I had a standard Google phone, which is off 99.9% of the time. I turn it on maybe 4 times a year for 2FA, mostly for YouTube. And then second is my primary phone. So that's the way I usually had it set up before. But now it's easier now that I can offer a phone number in the US and Canada only, though, not in the UK.
So the solution for someone like me or someone somewhere else in the world is to have two SIM cards or two separate phones.
Right. Now, fortunately, you're in Europe, so you probably have access to dual SIM phones, whereas here in the US, we don't. So if you have access to dual SIM phone, you put a second SIM. Now, here in the US, having a second line is kind of expensive. So this is one of the things I tried to do with my Brax Virtual Phone product. I made it as cheap as possible. So my service to allow you to have a separate phone number, which can forward, or if you want to get complicated, you can use SIP phones and SIP hardware, landline, all that. We have that offering as well. But all of this for $5 a month. So that's not expensive for what you're getting, and you're getting a line.
One thing you haven't mentioned, which I'm sure many people have thought, is what about VPNs? What about search engines? So let's start perhaps with VPNs. Do you have a VPN on permanently at home, that kind of thing?
Right. So, many people know that I have my own VPN product. So I'm going to tell you something that may shoot myself in the foot, because I'm going to tell you right now that you don't always need a VPN.
Okay.
Now, I haven't made a video about this, so you're the first one to hear this.
That's great.
Okay. If you have Starlink, you don't need a VPN. If you sell data, you don't need a VPN. If you're at home using your DSL, you definitely need a VPN. In fact, it's so important. I have a VPN router. I want everybody's traffic to be routed through the VPN at home. But if I'm on the road, I don't have to worry about that. And that's because when you're on mobile or on Starlink, you're actually sharing IPv6 addresses. You don't have an IPv4 address. The IPv4 address is the address of the router of Starlink or the router of your carrier. So if you're trying to hide your IPv4 address, which is exactly what this is about, that's what VPN does. Well, you don't need to hide it when you have IPv6. Now, somebody will say, well, but they have a record of who used whatever IPv6 address and so on. But the end person, the one receiving it, the other side of the network, cannot see that. So let's say that it's a government entity that you're accessing and you're trying to hack, and it came from a Starlink router. Can they ask Starlink to give the IPv6 address or identify the user that sent traffic between certain time and certain time? Yes, they can do that. Of course, as you know, that's not easy because many people will be accessing at the same time. Then now they have to go examine every single one of those people. So for the kind of threat that I worry about, which is privacy, and assuming you're not on active surveillance, that's the term I was using for active surveillance. If you're not under active surveillance, which means they think you're a bad guy, then you don't really need to concern yourself about this. So you don't need a VPN on the road. You don't have to set up your phone for a VPN on the road. You should set up a VPN router if you can at home. Then you don't have to think about your device. Because my home is set up with a VPN router, I don't really have to worry about my devices. They all go to the VPN router. They're all VPN at home.
I think it's important, the distinction you make is we're talking about privacy. We're not talking about security. And we're not advocating that anyone hack a government organization. We're just talking about privacy from like Facebook and the like, right?
Right.
It's a different outcome, different result.
Right. So the full explanation of this is called the threat model. So what do I, as Rob Braxman, what do I teach as far as, understanding your threat models? What I teach is the privacy side, and often it's really an individual against mass surveillance and mass data collection. My channel is not about equipping a criminal how to hide, because I'm going to tell you, if they want to hunt you down, you cannot hide. There's so many techniques. But we can keep that data from the Google database. And that's really, I don't want that data to be in the AI and used to manipulate the population. If 10% of people kept their data away from Google, that's enough for the world to be safe. That's enough for a rebellious group to say, no, we're not going to take that. So I'm trying to reach that 10% of people, that will decide that they want to be in the private category and not use a device that will track you 24/7. I'm not shooting for 100%, 10%, so that there's a vocal minority.
That's important. One other thing is search engine. I'm assuming you're not going to recommend Google. Are you recommending DuckDuckGo or someone? What's your recommended search engine?
Yeah, my recommended search engine is Startpage.
Okay.
Now, Startpage is using Google search. Now, why would I recommend something that uses Google search? Because whether we like it or not, Google's tracking everyone's data so effectively that they do their search the best. But if you go to Google and use Google search blindly with your Google ID, they actually manipulate the search results to fit you. So if what you're talking about is opposite of whatever they want you to see, they'll alter the result. And this is part of that program made by the partner entity in London, Moonshot CVE. This is what they do. They look at search data and then they change the search results. This is all programmed in. It's part of jigsaw.google.com, something that I said I should mention here, right? Because
But you mentioned it last time, and people were interested to know that. Yeah.
Right. So jigsaw.google.com is a project to manipulate search results. So why start page? Because if you use start page, they have no identity. So they can't manipulate you if they don't know who you are. So start page pays Google for the search data, but you get non-specific ads, non-personally targeted ads. So if you're searching for cars, obviously they'll pop ads on cars, but not knowing your personal preference, they won't say, we know you have a Tesla, so we're gonna focus on Rivian. We're gonna focus on competitors of Tesla. So they're not gonna do that because they don't know that.
So tell us more about Jigsaw, because last time it was quite a revelation, right? It was where the Google search results were changed to try and influence you. Is that correct?
That's what that project is with Moonshot CVE. So if you actually go to the Moonshot CVE website, you can see what the project is all about. Now, admittedly, it depends on your political posture here. If you're on the left, you may look at Moonshot CVE and say, hey, they're just promoting the things I believe in because I'm from the left. Moonshot CVE is definitely very lefty. It's, I would say, extremely left. And so some of the things they're trying to push are extremely leftist views. I tend to be more of a middle of the road kind of guy. And they're on the far left in there. So they've categorized certain people as violent extremists just because they don't like Hillary, as an example. So I think that's a bad use of data. I think that's putting more value in that data than it is. Why do you not like Hillary? There could be other reasons, and they don't know that, but they're just making a search in there based on what you search for. They're making a decision about your personality based on what you search for. The danger here is that if you search for a topic that may imply aggressiveness, then they imply you're aggressive, that you should be watched, and they put you on a watch list. And then they give your name to the FBI or whatever, or GCHQ, whatever. They give your name to somebody just because you believe in a certain way, just from search. Now, how valid is that?
Yeah.
Do you want that? Do you want that? I mean, people search for things all the time to find out what the opposite opinion is.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you believe that. And people have been categorized by this project, and they want to influence you. And I guess they say, well, if you're searching for that, maybe you're due for an influence. What is that in 1984? The book 1984, the camp where they go, at the end of the book where they brainwashing, they have to be brainwashed. So they say, oh, you need some brainwashing because you're not ultra left. Therefore, you need some brainwashing.
That's great. I mean, Rob, the only other things I wanted to ask you, right? You did a video where you said the top 10 things, I think it was, that you need to do to be private online. Do you want to talk about some of that, or?
I don't remember what the 10 things are because there are actually like 40 things, but
you said like IP address, use a VPN, phone numbers, IMI, IMSI, MAC address, CPU, advertising IDs.
Yeah, there are probably 40 items, and I listed what I believe would fit into a top 10 video because it's there's only a limit. But there's a combination of factors that you need to do, that you need to suppress to prevent somebody from getting your identity, which is really the main point. How to keep your identity from being associated with internet activity. I don't care what you do on the internet. You can go on the internet and doing something as long as it's legal. But what I don't want is for somebody to be curtailed from doing that because they've been identified, and that somebody can now put you on a map, which they do. I told you that Moonshot TV had a map where you actually, and to illustrate that point in my video, I actually went to a map in Texas, and you can actually pinpoint the specific homes that were anti-vax. Pretty crazy that they can do it to that level.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. It doesn't matter what the idea is, that these people were filtered out because of their search activity. So in any case, the main thing is to put this in a general perspective is you need to protect yourself from being identified by going to your platform, whatever it is. Let's say you go to, I hate using anything Meta because there's really no escaping them. But let's say you use TikTok, assuming it's not banned by the time this video comes out. But let's say you're going to TikTok, and you give them a different email address. So it's got to be a combination of things, a different phone number and a VPN IP address, or if you're on the road, cell data or Starlink. If you do all that, and I presume you don't use your real name, and something you can control on your own is not have TikTok track your location, then you've eliminated the main issues with tracking. Just that alone. It doesn't have to be complicated. So in my top 10 list, I have other things in there which may reveal like proximity, things like that, but this is really the main three. So you have to think about your phone number, your email, and your IP address, and all that must not have a Google ID. So it's really that simple. I mean, I can have complicated explanations, but that's really it, which is very hard. And by the way, David, I found that many channels focused on privacy don't really explain it like I do. I found that that they attack it mostly from the security side. And they're saying, well, you should, not go on the internet or go hide in a cave. And I don't really say that. I'm saying that you can do whatever you want as long as they don't know who you are. Pseudo anonymity is the term that I use. So if you're pseudo anonymous, if you have some alternate name, alternate ego, you can do whatever you want. Just don't give them your street address and your real phone number. So, yeah, so that's what I focus on now. So in fact, I was thinking about this. I sell quite a few products in my store, but they're all connected. I have the VPN, the Brax virtual phone, which gives you a phone number, Brax mail, which give you email aliases, unlimited aliases, and a VPN router. And it's funny that those really, the phone one took me a while. So now I'm a phone company, but a couple of weeks ago, I was not a phone company. So it was a problem that I've been trying to solve for ages, and I finally found a solution to that. And so now with that, I was going to say trifecta, but then I added another one. So it's 4 items. So I made products that actually can solve all of this. And if you have them all, then you're pretty much protected. Or if you want to buy from somebody else, most of that you can also buy from elsewhere. It doesn't have to be from me.
Rob, I think it's a really important conversation, right? And you've been shouting about this for a long time. And I think what's good to see is that more people are realizing that their privacy is at risk. And I'm glad that you differentiate between cybersecurity and privacy, because it's 2 different conversations. I've had people shout at me when I say do something for privacy, and they think it's a cybersecurity issue, but it's a different concept, or a different thing that we're trying to tackle. Any last words before we wrap up? Like, why is this important? Why do you keep fighting this battle?
Well, you already mentioned the difference between cybersecurity and privacy, and that's probably a good last thing to emphasize. Cybersecurity is for the benefit of someone, not necessarily you. Corporate cybersecurity is for the benefit of the corporation. Now, one thing about privacy is it's always to benefit the individual. So my channel, what I do always is for the individual, not for the corporation.
I love that, Rob. Thanks so much for sharing. Just for everyone who's watching, please go and subscribe, show the love. Rob is trying to grow his channel. Fantastic information there. Rob, again, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me, David.